are the best Yu-Gi-Oh strategies for the new Genesys format? It's actually a really interesting question, and after hours upon hours of testing, I think I figured out the answer. In today's video, big dogs, we're going to be diving into the Genesys format and exploiting some major weaknesses. We've been playing this format non-stop, and there's actually quite a few things that we're going to reveal to you that we have been taking advantage of. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with y'all big dogs? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal, but if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. The new Genesys format. For the people that don't know exactly what I'm talking about, Genesys format is a new official TCG format where Yu-Gi-Oh players must abide by a point system in order to play certain cards. We talked about it in yesterday's video in detail, so go ahead and check that out if you want to be fast-tracked to all of the information. And for the people that are wondering what cards are on this particular point system list, because not every card is, I'll leave a link down below in the description. But basically, this format is closer to a casual format since theoretically you can play every Yu-Gi-Oh card. But also, since certain cards require points, the old way we played Yu-Gi-Oh is pretty much demolished. And it's actually interesting because Konami said that this format has been in development for years, and I really wanted to fact check them. In actuality, they were kind of right. There were so many strategies that have dropped in the last few years that were complete question marks. Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that seemed really powerful in a casual setting, but not necessarily strong enough to be able to compete. And those same strategies just so happen to be pretty good in Genesys format. And of course, I'm going to be talking about some of those strategies that we've been having success with and strategies that we've been taking advantage of the point system with, but we have to talk about the elephant in the room with Vanquish Soul. By far, big dogs, Vanquish Soul is the strongest deck in the room when it comes to Genesys format. And the reason is because it's not hit hard enough. Ironically, Vanquish Soul could be considered as a stronger Yu-Gi-Oh deck in Genesys format than it is in the advanced TCG format. As you guys can see here, players can play 3 copies of Dimension Shifter alongside of 3 copies of Razin and 3 copies of Stake Your Soul. This is theoretically a way more stronger version of Vanquish Soul King 9. I also want to point out that one of these blank cards is Paradise Smasher. It's doesn't have a limitation on it. This by far has led players to be up in arms when it comes to Vanquish Soul King 9. It seems by far the strongest deck in the entire game, and I think that that was by design. I think it was designed for players in the TCG that don't necessarily like the hits that just happened on the ban list to be able to just transfer over to Genesys format and have that feeling of being fun. But there are actually some hidden holes that we've noticed about Vanquish Soul. First, if you go back to the deck, it has no hand traps outside of Dimension Shifter. Second, another really important thing is missing from this deck. I want to reiterate that in Genesys format, Link monsters are completely banned alongside of Pendulums. It means that Rocco the Vanquisher is not a playable card. And while players didn't play 3 copies of that card inside of the TCG format, not having access to it at all changes the dynamic of the game. In my opinion, the cost of K9 cards combined with Link monsters being completely expunged and the lack of hand traps is a clear weakness for this strategy. It just might stumble when you compare it to the other decks that we're talking about that don't have a lot of cost, can play hand traps, and aren't reliant on Link monsters whatsoever because there's a ton of strategies like that. Also, by the way, I am using Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck.com to show you guys deck lists, and these have been deck lists that people have generated. I'll still be putting my personal deck list of Genesys decks on my Patreon as a special thank you for helping me pay my editors, and I'll also even be making more Genesys content depending on what you guys are doing to this video. We gotta make sure that we're commenting down below what are the strategies you want to see for the next duel challenge, Genesys format. With Link and Pendulum monsters gone, Exceeds, Fusions, and Synchros take the center stage. I think Exceed monsters are some of the most powerful cards that have ever existed, with Synchro monsters mostly requiring a tuner, which makes them fairly restrictive, and Fusion monsters even more restrictive than that. Exceed cards may be the strongest route to go when it comes to competitive success. So why not pick a strategy that can take advantage of cards like Dimension Shifter only costing 5 points and being an Exceed dominant deck? I think Exosister has a genuine shot in this format. There's a couple of things that are amazing about Exosister. One is that there isn't a single card on the list that costs a point that is Exosister or even directly Exosister support. Unlike Vanquish Soul, this is one of the very few decks that gives you flexibility to be able to play disruption cards that you want. And here I think is a pretty good example of Exosisters inside of the Genesys format. As you guys can see, the points can be spread across cards like Dimension Shifter, Molchummy, Effect Veiler, Perulia, Ghost Ogre, and even the side deck, which includes Molchummy Meows. Of course, big dogs, you guys can play whatever you want, but the Exosister approach is a little bit different. Instead of playing a few cards that require a ton of points to be able to use, you can do the opposite route and play pretty good cards that require a lower amount. There are also just some pretty good staple Yu-Gi-Oh cards that don't require any points right now. DD Crow and Dark Ruler or more are pretty good. I love that Exosister has the versatility to get you to be able to play whatever you want. And seeing that it's using the strongest, most up-to-date, most supported mechanic in Genesys format, it's probably one of your best bets. Now, the funny thing is that I talked about how Konami said that they've been doing this for years, and they actually have. In fact, I can recall quite a few times where Yu-Gi-Oh strategies came inside of a core set close to being incredibly good, but not good enough to be able to compete. Ironically, in this format, they're actually really good. I think if you go back to Supreme Darkness, it really does explain so much. This set was notoriously top heavy, players only wanting the best cards out of the set where the archetypes were let down. But ironically, those same archetypes that are let down are really powerful. Tri-Brigade Gladiator Beast was a decent Yu-Gi-Oh deck for TCG terms. In fact, this was the exact version that topped the regional, and outside of the staple Yu-Gi-Oh cards, this deck is left mostly unhit. I mean, sure, both Gladiator Beast Geyserist and Gladiator Beast Tamer Editor do cost a decent chunk of points, but the cool thing about it is that you only need one of these cards. And this is a combo-based Yu-Gi-Oh deck where players are going to have to budget out cards like Droll and Lockbird and Nibiru Primal Being, meaning that you'll see them a lot less. What's crazy enough is almost the exact same thing can be said about Heroes. With Stratos only costing 3 points, the main deck is fairly feasible. And while Dark Law does cost 70 points, I've been talking about cutting this card for quite some time. It might be that time. Both of these decks received question marks when they were introduced in Supreme Darkness because they couldn't compete at that time. But now looking back, these are Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that could be really strong in the Genesys format. I also think that Tri-Brigade is extremely underrated and it just got support from the newest set. The only beef here is that Fire Formation Tanky cost a whopping 40 points, so you might want to steer clear from a pure Tri-Brigade deck. Maybe mix it up with some other strategies. Now big dogs, in case you're jumping into playing Yu-Gi-Oh because Genesys format interests you, or you are a Yu-Gi-Oh player through and through and just love protecting your cards, you should probably go to TheCaliEffect.com to get your premium protection. Listen here, big dog, I have spent over 20 years playing this Yu-Gi-Oh game. God damn, I'm old! And I know what it's like to have Yu-Gi-Oh cards that mean a lot to you. So make sure you go ahead and go to TheCaliEffect.com and purchase your sleeves today. And don't forget about the mats. Genesys mats coming soon. The last two strategies I think is a little bit of copium, because while we did test them, we didn't get enough testing to be able to justify it. If you guys are starting to see a theme, underpowered Yu-Gi-Oh decks are relatively strong. Bonus points, that anime decks also seem to be doing really good as well. We haven't gotten around to Akiza's Rose Dragon strategy, and I'm pretty interested to see what Yusei's deck is going to do in Regenesis, but I know for a fact both Jack Atlas and Crow Hogan's decks are pretty solid. Now hear me out, this might be a copium take. Both of these strategies have unique situations, with not a single Red Dragon Archfiend card costing you pretty much anything. Well, except for Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Calamity, that costs 1 point. Yes, you can play that card again. And if you guys remember anything about Red Dragon Archfiend, me being Black Atlas, this is a 1-card combo deck that is similar to what Snake Eyes was. What I mean by that is that 1 card can get you through your entire combo, and its locks don't seem that bad when Fusions, Synchros, and Exceeds are really the only monsters to play. If anything, Red Dragon Archfiend's locks make more sense inside of Genesys format than in the TCG. When we compare this to a deck like Snake Eyes, which has no locks, but is one of the best decks of all time, and then you look at Red Dragon Archfiend, which feels kind of like a more casual version of it. It's a deck that has built-in board breakers, really strong monsters, and omni negation cards, and requires absolutely nothing. It genuinely feels like one of those plug-and-play strategies where you can put whatever you want into this deck to make it even stronger. In fact, here is a Red Dragon Archfiend deck. By the way, it can search Fiendish Chain, which is kind of good now. This deck cost 0 points. That's right, somebody really built a 0-point Genesys Red Dragon Archfiend deck. Do with that information you will. Now, Blackwings have a different outcome, but a similar trajectory. There are some cards that actually cost a little bit for Blackwings. Allure of Darkness, for some reason, cost 5 points, but more specific Blackwing cards are Zephyros and Borea Storm the Wicked Wind, costing a decent chunk. But outside of that, Blackwings is pretty straightforward, ridiculously powered, and can still make those gigantic boards that you guys have been looking to do. I also want you guys to keep in mind, these decks were once hampered by the tons of hand traps that your opponent can play. But now, because of Genesys format, that decision tree has to be made, and less hand traps will be inside of these formats, meaning that these strategies will actually be able to combo a lot more efficiently. This here is an example of a Blackwing deck that you guys could take home and run away with. But between 2 Chinook, that's 10 points, a Blackwing Zephyros, that's 15, putting it at 25, 45 with Blackwing Borea Storm, means that you got about 55 points to work with. 60 points if you cut a Chinook. I'm actually pretty inspired by the Genesys format. It got rid of 2 problematic mechanics, the mechanics that players overwhelmingly dislike. I actually even made videos talking about them being dislikable formats. It curbs hand trap usage while also appealing to the players that say unban every single Yu-Gi-Oh card to see what happens, because for some reason there's a growing amount of them. While I'm not ready to give a final verdict on the format just yet, I think more testing is in order. I am pretty excited to be able to play with some of the Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that were completely useless in the modern format. And I want you guys to let me know down below in the comment section what are some other Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that you think are amazing in the Genesys format. Until then, big dogs, for more Genesys content, go ahead and let me know. Maybe a Genesys tier list on the way, but also be sure to check out these videos so I can catch you on the next one.